In a bustling city where skyscrapers touched the clouds and passers-by hurried past without noticing the shadows of life, a young homeless girl found something unusual, a millionaire's bank card. But what she asked for in return broke the millionaire's heart and made him cry. On the streets of the city she called home, on the cold sidewalk that had become her bed, lived Mary, a girl of about 13. She had long ago grown accustomed to the cold stares of passers-by, the whispers of pity, and the empty promises of help. Her face, though covered with a layer of street dirt, shone with childlike innocence. Mary was an early orphan forgotten by this cruel world. Every day she sat on the corner of the city's busiest street, clutching a tin cup and hoping for change from the occasional kind-hearted passerby. But Mary was smart. She knew how to become inconspicuous, how to glide through the city while remaining in the shadows. She didn't steal or carry other people's purses. Her life depended on the rare acts of kindness of the few who dared to stop. Life was hard, but it was the only peace she knew. One cold evening, as the wind forgot about pity and the lights of the city flickered in the twilight, something strange happened. Among the crowd, Mary noticed a man in an expensive suit hurrying past. His cell phone was pressed to his ear, his steps were quick. He was clearly a wealthy man, his polished shoes glistened and his watch shimmered in the light of the street lamps. In his haste, he dropped something from his pocket. Mary saw a black credit card gleam. She picked it up, going unnoticed as she always did. On the card was a name, George Voropeev. The name didn't tell her anything, but the card's appearance gave away that it belonged to an important and wealthy man. Her first impulse was to return the find, but clutching the card in her hands, she thought, what if this was her chance to change her life? She had heard stories of how lost cards became salvation for people like her. It was possible to buy food, clothes, find a way off the streets. But Mary hesitated. She was no thief. Nevertheless, the hunger and despair that had become her constant companions clouded her thoughts. That night Mary did not return the card. She decided to keep it. She told herself she would return the card, but first she had to find out what she could do. George was a self-made millionaire. Born into a humble family, he had worked his way from the bottom to the top of the corporate world, building an empire of wealth and success. But with each conquered frontier, something in him changed. Softness gave way to hardness, humanity to ambition, and greed and desire for power became his new essence. George had everything. Luxury cars, a house, a private jet, but inside he felt empty. His marriage had broken up years ago, and the only daughter he had left, Lisa, was estranged, despising him because his career had always been more important than his family. For George, money was the solution to all problems. If someone is unhappy, they just don't have enough money. But deep down inside he knew this was a lie, although he stubbornly hid this truth under layers of work and material possessions. The next morning Mary stood outside a large supermarket. Her stomach rumbled loudly as she looked at the display cases full of food. A credit card could give her everything she dreamed of. But would it work for someone like her? She felt the weight of the card in her pocket and gathered her courage and went inside, filling the cart with food, warm clothes, and a pair of shoes that fit her small, calloused feet perfectly. She headed for the cash register. Her heart pounded frantically as she handed her card to the cashier. She swiped the card without even a glance, and the screen lit up with the word, approved. Mary experienced surprise and even disbelief. It worked. It really worked. But instead of joy, she felt a strange sense of guilt. She didn't want to live her life stealing from others, even if it was a rich person who probably wouldn't notice the loss. After taking her things, Mary made a decision. She would find George and return the card. She had taken what she needed to survive the next few days, and that would be enough. Finding George wasn't hard. His name was in the news and on business websites. With her street smarts, Mary quickly figured out where his office was located, situated in the heart of the financial district. The marble and glass surrounding the building looked intimidating. Mary, in her shabby clothes, walked through the gleaming doors, feeling out of place. While the people around her looked around with surprise and disbelief, the receptionist of the business center eyed her with suspicion. But when Mary mentioned George's lost credit card, the woman's eyes widened. Soon Mary found herself in the office. George was on the phone, not paying any attention to her. His huge, luxurious office emphasized his status. When he finally glanced at Mary, his eyes narrowed in incomprehension. What does that mean? "Who are you?" he asked in a cold, harsh tone. Mary stepped forward, holding out the card. "I think this belongs to you." George glanced at the map, then looked at the girl again. "Did you find it?" His voice had softened, but there was still a tinge of steel in it. Mary nodded and explained how she had picked up the map and how she had used it to buy food and clothes. "I'm sorry I used it," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to steal it. It's just, I needed something to eat." George was silent for a moment, studying the little girl in front of him. Her words had touched something deep inside him. She had returned the card, though she could have spent all the money and disappeared forever into the humming streets of the city. But instead she stood there, apologizing for a tiny fraction of his wealth. Mary looked up, barely audibly whispering, "I don't want money or clothes. I don't want any of the things this card can buy. I want something else." George frowned. "And what do you want?" Mary hesitated. She looked down at the floor and her voice trembled. I want a family." George froze. Of all the things he'd expected to hear, this was the one he hadn't anticipated. A family. Those words echoed in his head, causing a pinching sensation he hadn't felt in a long time. The request shook him to his core. He had been willing to offer her money, a place to live, even tuition. But family. That was something that couldn't be bought, something he himself had failed to keep. He tried to explain to her that he wasn't cut out for it, said he didn't know how to be part of a family, that he'd lost that part of himself too long ago. But Mary, with wide-open eyes full of hope, asked, "Can't you try?" Her question hung in the air like a challenge. George struggled with himself. His whole life had been built around money, success, and the belief that wealth could solve any problem. But standing in front of him was a girl who didn't care about his fortune. She didn't need the world of things, she needed what he'd lost years ago, a connection, a sense of belonging. Torn between a habitual desire to push people away and a growing desire to help, George agreed. He'd offered Mary to live with him for a while, told himself it was temporary, that he was just giving her a chance until something better could be found. But in the back of his mind, he knew it was more than just helping a random kid. As the days passed, Mary began to change his life. She took a genuine interest in everything around her, his work, his home, the city outside his windows. She asked him questions that no one had ever asked before, making him think about his past, his mistakes, and his loneliness. But their fragile peace was soon shattered. Lisa, George's estranged daughter, found out about it. She has never forgiven her father for sacrificing his family for his career. Now, after learning that he had taken in another man's girl, she was filled with anger and pain. Lisa came to George, accusing him. You think you can replace me with this girl?" Her voice shook with emotion. "How many times have you left me alone, choosing work over family? And now you want to be a father to someone else." Her words were like blows to long-hidden wounds. George realized that behind every decision was the shadow of his past, and he would have to face it head-on. The argument between father and daughter was intense, filled with years of unspoken resentment and pain. George, who used to pride himself on his ability to keep things under control, was helpless in the face of Lisa's rage. He did not know how to mend his relationship with her, and now he feared he was failing Mary as well. The tension between George, Lisa, and Mary reached a breaking point when Mary, overhearing their heated argument, decided to leave. She did not want to be the cause of further misery in George's life and thought that perhaps he would be better off without her. For several days George searched for Mary. His heart was filled with regret. He realized how much he had grown attached to her, and her absence had left a huge void in his life. He reflected on all the mistakes he had made, not only with Mary but also with Lisa, and how he had pushed people away for the sake of his career. During this period, George had an epiphany. He realized that money could not fill the emptiness that was inside him, and that all the wealth in the world could not replace love and connection with loved ones. He had chased material success for so long that he had forgotten what really mattered. George found Mary where he had first met her. On the street, sitting alone with a tin cup in her hands. She looked up at him, tears in her eyes. But before she could say anything, George knelt down and hugged her tightly. "Mary, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything." Mary, sobbing against his chest, forgave him. She didn't need explanations or promises of riches. All she had ever wanted was someone to care for her, someone to call family. In the days that followed, George began to rebuild his relationship with Lisa. It wasn't easy. They had difficult conversations full of pain, but gradually they began to rebuild the broken bridges. Lisa, seeing the change in her father, began to let go of her resentments. She even found common ground with Mary, and an unexpected but strong bond developed between them. George's life, once centered on money and power, was now devoted to much more important things: love, family, and the relationships that give meaning to existence. He realized that true wealth is not measured in money, but in the people you love and the connections you cherish. Mary, once a small beggar with nothing, found what she had always dreamed of: a family.